Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to Next Door NetAdmin. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about the networking that is found in Windows Server, specifically around Hyper-V. Now, a lot of the information I'm going to be talking about is kind of historical in that it was available and it's been phased out now or is actively being phased out. But as I am usually doing, I'm talking about it so that you have an idea of where we've been and where we are now and how we moved from one to another. Because it's one where I think Microsoft kind of, did not choose the best way of going about it. So we're going to talk about it. We're going to start in 2012, Server 2012, with a new feature called LBFO. That stands for Load Balancing and Failover. This was essentially a way of bonding multiple network cards into a single unified interface. Rather than having one network card with IP address 1, second network card with IP address 2, you could merge them into a single interface and you just had your IP address, and then it could use either interface or both interfaces, and if one went down, you still had a functional network card that you could use with your one configured IP address. This added more stability, more redundancy. It was generally a great thing. It had a few different modes to it. One was switch independent mode, where it would just connect to whatever switches it was connected to, and then the server would try and puppet the network into sending traffic where it wanted it, usually by using things like gratuitous ARP packets to say, oh no, this IP address is on this interface now. Oh no, the IP address is now on this interface over here. And it would try and puppet the network into doing what it wanted. Okay, that's a method, I suppose. The other major mode that it had was LACP, which, as we know, is Link Aggregation Control Protocol. This was judged not desirable by Microsoft, by the server folks. From my perspective, as a network admin, that's exactly what I wanted. I want the switches to have the knowledge that this is an aggregated link. Use either one or both and negotiate it actively with the server so that the network is a full participant in this architecture. Okay, fine. People have their differences of opinion on what mode is better. Okay, sure. This is a big world. We all have differences of opinion. That's fine. But LBFO did not last as long as it was anticipated to. We'll put it that way. Because starting in Windows Server 2016, Microsoft said, "Oh, that thing we just introduced 4 years ago, yeah, we're going to toss that out. It's not doing what we want. We're going to do this new thing, and we're calling it Switch Embedded Teaming, or SET." Now, few things here to note. Differences between the two. LBFO had a particular design to it. It was GUI driven primarily. There was a link to configure NIC teaming right there in Server Manager. And it was designed to just create a bonded interface. However many network cards you wanted to put into it, it would create a bonded network interface. And then that bonded interface could be used directly by the operating system, or you could bind a Hyper-V virtual switch to your bonded interface. So that Hyper-V didn't need to worry about it. You configured the bond however you wanted it, using whatever mode you wanted, and then you told Hyper-V to use that, and it would, same as it would use any other network card. Okay. Switch embedded teaming was a very different thing. In order to use it, you had to create a Hyper-V virtual switch. And the Hyper-V virtual switch is what did the teaming. It was just embedded into the virtual switch from the get-go. And it only had one mode, switch independent mode. It had no LACP capabilities whatsoever. But Microsoft made the decision and they said, we're going to be moving forward with this new switch embedded teaming. We're not putting any more effort into LBFO. That's done and dusted. News to most of the system administration and network administration community, because what Microsoft did, and this is where I think they fell down quite badly, was LBFO still had a graphical link in Server Manager. Anytime somebody saw Nick teaming and clicked on that link and they were brought to this, nice dialogue, that was LBFO. Conversely, there was no way, none whatsoever, to do switch embedded teaming, except through PowerShell. It's the only way that you can create a switch embedded team is through PowerShell, even to this day. There's no GUI for it. So people, would install 2016. They'd go, oh, Nick teaming, great, I want that. Click, and they'd configure it. Even in Server 2019, oh, Nick teaming, great, click, I want to do that. Nick teaming went away in 2022 and 2025 because it's switch embedded teaming now. But nobody realized that until it was gone, because Microsoft kept the old thing graphically in front of everybody's face and just expected that people would realize, oh, the thing you see right there, yeah, you're not supposed to use that anymore. Let's open PowerShell and do this manually. Another thing that was less optimal in my mind was that Nick teaming could be used on servers, period. And you didn't need to have any specific role configured. If you had just one hardware server running Windows Server 2012 or 2016 or even 2019, you could configure LBFO and you're good to go. But switch embedded teaming requires Hyper-V because it's an option in a Hyper-V switch. So you needed to install Hyper-V in order to get this functionality. And you still do. SET did start out being available in Windows client operating systems as well. If you look at old Microsoft documentation, it was available in Windows 10, 1809, and newer. But it's no longer available in Windows 11, which, okay, fine. If you look at Windows 11 and other client operating systems as light versions of the software, then maybe they don't have all the features. Okay, fine, whatever. I guess there's nothing I can do about that. But you still need Hyper-V on the server before you can configure this thing. And it still only has switch independent mode. It does not have any sort of LACP functionality whatsoever. As far as the network is concerned, the server is just randomly switching ports on who knows what reason or what schedule, and the network just kind of has to try and adapt and keep up with that. So why did we do this? More specifically, why did Microsoft do this? Well, there's a couple of reasons for that. Number one, LBFO was very much based on the network cards and on the driver architecture for the network cards, something called NDIS, which I believe I've talked about once or twice, or at least mentioned in passing. But that is a very old interface. NDIS itself goes all the way back to Windows 95 or earlier. So it's very much a legacy architecture, still very active and still incredibly useful because it's a lower level interface. But it's definitely a legacy one. And so there were a lot of bits and bobs that LBFO had to deal with that made it a little more difficult to maintain and did not allow for some of the newer features that Microsoft was wanting to push for performance reasons And for scalability, I'll say, LBFO was a decent product. It was a decent feature. It absolutely was. But because it was based very much on the driver for those ports, that also meant that it had to go through the operating system. So data had to be received by hardware, had to go to the host operating system, then it had to be passed to Hyper-V, then it could go to the virtual machines. Switch embedded teaming changed things by cutting the host operating system out of this entirely. It just went from the hardware to the hypervisor, and then from the hypervisor it could go to the virtual machine, or it could go to the management operating system, but it just went to the hypervisor first rather than having to go through the host operating system. And that allowed a few other things to be implemented in a teamed environment. Things like RDMA, remote direct memory access, SMB direct, other things where the network traffic was supposed to be able to just go straight to the destination as quickly as possible without having to pass through multiple layers of interpretation and handling. So for performance reasons, switch embedded teaming was seen as the better way to go. When I talk about scalability, one of the things in hyperconverged, I'm going to use another big buzzword here, hyperconverged network architecture, is that it's mostly software defined. And so where everything is software defined on the network side, it's simple enough in their minds to just say, oh yeah, well, it's going to just be software talking to software, and so everything will just be able to be configured in sync, and you don't need a networking protocol like LACP to have the server and the network hardware negotiate and talk to each other. In practice, I've never run hyperconverged anything. I know what it is. I know the general way of how to deal with it, but none of my clients are using hyperconverged anything. They're not at the level where they need it. They're not able to have a budget that accounts for that sort of thing. So it's a moot point. If you want the network to be able to talk to your server, you're either counting on the server to puppet the network into doing what it wants, or you want something like LACP so that the administrator can say, hey, I want my switches to understand this, I want the server to understand this, and I want them to talk to each other. It's the way it is. So, as much as I understand that there were some reasons for Microsoft to move to switch embedded teaming, I think the two things that really messed it up was, number one, they'd only just introduced LBFO 4 years ago, in 2012. 4 years is such a short period of time in networking and server administration. Everybody's like, oh yeah, here's the new NIC teaming thing, that's the latest and greatest. No, it was the latest and greatest last time, and now it's old hat and nobody's going to use it anymore. What? Nobody understands that. Nobody understands it at all. And they understand it even less when the old thing from 2012, you load up 2016 and the old thing from 2012 still has the link in Server Manager to go configure it. But the new thing that you're supposed to be using from now on is buried somewhere in PowerShell. You don't even have a way to configure it in Hyper-V Manager. If you open up Hyper-V Manager and go to Virtual Switch Manager, you can't configure teaming there. Literally the only way to do this is through the command line. And when you do that, you get, if you set the allow management OS parameter on the switch to true, you get one management adapter. Okay, you get one. You can set the VLAN on that one. I've just discovered and tested it out to confirm that you can actually put multiple management interfaces on that virtual switch. But again, that requires diving into PowerShell, which most small to medium business level admins are not going to dive into. They're working on the desktop of the server. They're looking at the GUI tools. And this also is a blind spot to some degree, because the rest of Windows Server, when you go through the GUI in Server Manager and tell it to join a domain, it's issuing PowerShell commands behind the scenes. And Microsoft openly said, our GUIs are there to help admins, but they're going to be issuing the PowerShell commands behind the scenes. If you want, you can do the same thing by just doing the PowerShell yourself, but the GUI is there to just give you a friendly front end to it, and it'll be speaking PowerShell behind the scenes. So this is already how they were doing things. Why is Switch Embedded Teaming the one and only place where they're like, yeah, you know what? It's still controlled using PowerShell like everything else, but this is the one thing where we're not going to put a GUI on it. You have to figure that out yourself. Oh, and the GUI that we're going to leave up is for this old feature that we're not developing anymore and only had for 4 years. And yeah, just here's the honeypot. Here's the trap. Go do this, but we're not actually going to support it, and we're going to take it away eventually. So you're going to have to learn this command line thing. Bad, very bad setup. It was not great. So Switch Embedded Teaming. It's what we've got. It's here to stay. It's there for reasons of scalability and performance. It does not have LACP, which as a network admin kind of grinds my gears a little bit, but there's not anything that I can do about it. It's just how it is. So, yeah. It's something that I'm revisiting as I'm preparing to do a major upgrade for a client site, and going through and sorting out all the PowerShell commands that I need for this one thing for which Microsoft has decided there shall be no GUI. It's fun. That's what it is. It's fun. All right, cool. So hopefully you found this discussion illuminating and informative, so that you know where we've been and where we're going and how we got here. If there's other topics that you would like to hear me talk about, or things that you would like to see me demonstrate, feel free to let me know right down there in the comments section. Otherwise, thank you very much for watching. I am your Next Door NetAdmin, and we will see you next time.